Hi, welcome to my video. This is going to be my thoughts on Young Jedi Adventures, the Star Wars show, Season 2, Episode 1, Heroes and Hotshots / a Jedi or a Pirate. Now, the episode is probably rated TV Y7, the other ones are, so will this video be. And like all other videos I've done on the show, there will be spoilers for Star Wars leading up to and including it. And yeah, the episode is quite good. I'm not sure I would say I loved it, but you know, it wasn't really made for me. So as per usual, doing, gonna try to more or less split in half as go over the first half of the episode and then the second half, since they are two separate stories. So with the first one, before I get into details about the episode, the story of the episode itself, briefly, the intro has been changed since Season 1, reflecting the inclusion of, let's see if I can get his name right, Wes Vinnick. And we also have the, it's the first place we see an upgraded version of the Firehawk. And yeah, I do think it is a good idea to have I can see it opening up new options for them to have, although he evidently isn't going to appear in every single story because he's not in the second story of this episode, but yeah, having them go around with a Padawan opens up story possibilities that them spending all their time with either younglings or a master or that sort of thing. It's not the first time they've been around a Padawan, but it seems like he's going to be in a lot of episodes based on the fact that he's in the intro. I don't have an awful lot to say about the first story of this episode. It is fairly straightforward, bread and butter, meat and potatoes kind of, character who has to let other people in, let other people help, trust other people and such. And yeah, I do really appreciate acknowledging it is definitely something we here in the West. I try not to, I don't know that I'm really qualified to speak to the rest of the world, but we here in Western white majority countries really need to get better at listening to children. They understand so much more than we often appreciate. So 100%, obviously they shouldn't be doing like vigilantism as they do on this show. Well, vigilantes, they shouldn't be out fighting criminals and such, but it's Star Wars. It's always been, let's see. Not an awful lot else, I think. Right, and it also, very much shows that Wes, part of why he is so overconfident is that he is very skilled, and that's another thing, it's very tortoise in the hare kind of thing. Don't get overconfident or you might fail. But yeah, I think they do a really solid job of making it clear there's no way that it would have worked out if Wes had not accepted help from the others. From the younglings, people he thought of as, no, I'm supposed to lead them. They can't help me, I suppose it is kind of fitting that I literally just watched Lightyear. Yeah, still working my way through the, Pixar and Disney animated backlog. Now that I have Disney Plus, they're there. Might as well watch them. I'm quite fond of both Pixar and animated Disney. Disney needs to treat its workers better. There's a lot of things they need to do better on, but I do have a soft spot for a lot of their output. And that actually does lead nicely into when it happened once. I thought maybe it's just, maybe it's not anything unusual. But then it happened twice. Twice in this episode. In both stories of this episode, Nash refers to, first time she says, my mom and I, and the second time she says, my parents. She used to say, my mom's, plural, because she, I don't know if it's IVF or adoption, but yeah, she has two moms who are in a sapphic relationship together. And the fact that Disney have recently, let's see, this episode originally aired August 14th, 2024. Yeah, more recently, there have been several, I actually don't even at this point remember them all. Let's see, I think one of them was, let's see, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Then there was that other, you know what, I'm just gonna see, Disney removing trans. So, yeah, Win or Lose was one of them. I feel like there was at least one more. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I'm not going to spend forever on it. Let's see. I think that might be about... Right, yeah. Lightyear did indeed have same-sex relationship. And I thought they did a good job. It felt so organic. Like, I wonder how many kids saw that and just realized, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. They didn't... Sometimes it can be a detriment if you're really putting a huge amount of emphasis on it. Okay, I'm not seeing any story that talks about any other... I feel like there was at least one other show than the two of... But yeah. Let's see. So, yeah, they, because of Trump and the whole anti-woke moral panic, really looking forward to that being over. But until then, we're going to have to fight pretty consistently if we want, and we do, any kind of positive representation of minorities. In this case, trans, but I'm sure they're coming for the other ones as well. Even if you don't care about trans, there's that poem, first they came for the, yeah. Right, I think the only other thing I really have to say about this first story is the thing with the, when Wes meets Nubs, he says, I don't understand a word you're saying, but I promise I'll learn. And that's such a wonderful, because that literally is all that we're being asked. When we encounter someone who speaks a language or communicates in some way that, could be nonverbal, that we don't currently understand, just try to learn. That's like, you're not being... you're not gonna go to the Hague. This is not some kind of huge... Just try to learn. If it's the first time you're encountering it, then of course you don't know. So yeah, I thought I quite appreciated that. It's if the episode had a similar, like, had wanted to impart that lesson, but had come out, like, I don't know, 30 years ago, there would probably have been a lot of, like, Wes trying to avoid to talk to Nubs, and then finally by the end, excruciating, like pulling tooth, finally he's like, I'm sorry, I don't know how to communicate with you, and then someone else would be, but you could learn, and he's like, oh, Home Alone face, monks, the scream kind of thing, just... I appreciate that we're just there, because again, kids watch the show, and literally, it's such a great lesson to teach them. Just, yeah, you can learn. That's the wonderful thing about life. There's always room to improve. Now, that does bring us to the second half of this episode. And this is one of those where I do have to watch how I approach this, because it is a sensitive subject. So I guess I'll just briefly, yeah, couple of things just off the... I do appreciate this idea of, it is very important to keep kids away from bad influences. And it is, of course, appealing to kids, you know, oh, life without rules, you know, that could be very exciting, very fun. And let's see, I did like when they, let's see, when they're honest with Hootie, you know, like there is that thing about a good deed is its own reward, but it's also, you know, some kids are only going to do good if they think something good will come of it for them. So, yeah, and honesty is a really good thing to encourage in kids. And the thing about, you know, I understand you're sad, but please talk to someone, don't run away. You know, that's extremely important to impart upon kids. Yeah, I quite like that you know, the kids get to play with darts because there is a sci-fi dart that seemingly can't hurt anyone, because otherwise you really don't want kids throwing darts. Yeah. I think that might be about what I have before I get into the... So, before I proceed, let me start by saying, obviously, ideally, stealing should not happen, period. However, we know, like, the numbers are in. Shoplifting, a lot of the time, like a huge percentage, is, like, food and, like, baby supplies. You know, it's not this... Yeah. This episode does actually feature shoplifting for food, but it's a character... You know, that's the thing is, it's unclear if he could actually afford... Like, we know that if Bren went back to the temple, there would be food. You know, he wouldn't starve if he just stayed at the temple, which is where, you know, that's where the people taking care of him are, kind of thing. It's unclear if Clave could afford food, and that's, you know, part of how they get to this, because if they acknowledge, oh, but Clave actually can't afford it, you know, that's the thing. Like, they're definitely trying to say that Clave, it's a character flaw. He refuses to pay and still expects to get things, but he's also a pirate, so, like, how much money does he have, and could he stop being a pirate and, like, get a job, you know, because that is obviously... Yeah, like I mentioned at the, you know, early in this very video, it is preferable for, you know, the less stealing the better, but we have to actually acknowledge the causes of stealing, and it is, you know, considering all the wage theft that Disney is responsible for, it is mighty rich for them to be like, don't steal, you shouldn't do, you know, but it's, again, them trying to appeal to conservatives. Yeah, I think that more or less covers... Yeah, it does, you know, there is a pattern. You know, before even it was Disney, Star Wars, right from the start, you know, does have this very classist thing, you know, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy, and it's a bunch of low-class individuals who are violent and aggressive, and, you know, oh, there's just no way to get out of a situation with them except to resort to violence. And, you know, I do really appreciate them trying to, you know, the attempt to subvert that in The Last Jedi with, you know, no, it's upper class people who are horrible, and, you know, yeah. The worst things that have been done throughout history, like a huge chunk of them, have been done by people who had tremendous power rather than people who had very little, if any, power. But yeah, I think that does cover yeah, really appreciate that there at the end. Bren is making friends, and he does have a great story to tell. Yeah, someone working on this episode really wanted both stories of the episode to end with someone telling a fascinating story. That is one thing. When, Kai is being told the really cool story about the moons of Yago, what about Liz and Nubs? Like, they're not that far away from you. Catch up to them so they get to hear the cool story too. Like, we know they appreciate that kind of thing. I don't know why that was, yeah,